Hi, this is Pastor Josh from First Baptist de Queen. Thank you for joining us as we read through God's Word every single day. Today we are starting in Numbers chapter 8. Now the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to Aaron and say to him, when you set up the lamps, the 7 lamps shall give light in front of the lampstand." And Aaron did so. He set up its lamps in front of the lampstand as the Lord commanded Moses. And this was the workmanship of the lampstand, hammered work of gold from its base to its flowers. It was hammered work according to the pattern that the Lord had shown Moses, so he made the lampstand. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Take the Levites from among the people of Israel and cleanse them. Thus you shall do to them to cleanse them. Sprinkle the water of purification upon them, and let them go with a razor over all their body, and wash their clothes and cleanse themselves. Then let them take a bull from the herd, and its grain offering, a fine flour mixed with oil. And you shall take another bull from the herd for a sin offering. And you shall bring the Levites before the tent of meeting, and assemble the whole congregation of the people of Israel. When you bring the Levites before the Lord, the people of Israel shall lay their hands on the Levites, and Aaron shall offer the Levites before the Lord as a wave offering from the people of Israel, that they may do the service of the Lord." So service to God is special and ought to be treated as such, as they are consecrating, setting apart, preparing these guys to do that work. "Then the Levites shall lay their hands on the heads of the bulls, and you shall offer the one for a sin offering and the other for a burnt offering to the Lord to make atonement for the Levites. And you shall set the Levites before Aaron and his sons, and shall offer them as a wave offering to the Lord. Thus you shall separate the Levites from among the people of Israel, and the Levites shall be mine. And after that the Levites shall go in to serve at the tent of meeting, when you have cleansed them and offered them as a wave offering. For they are wholly given to me from among the people of Israel. Instead of all who open the womb, the firstborn of all the people of Israel, I have taken them for myself. For all the firstborn among the people of Israel are mine, both of man and of beast. On the day that I struck down all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, I consecrated them for myself, and I have taken the Levites instead of all the firstborn among the people of Israel. And I have given the Levites as a gift to Aaron and his sons from among the people of Israel, to do the service of the people of Israel at the tent of meeting, and to make atonement for the people of Israel, that there may be no plague among the people of Israel when the people of Israel come near the sanctuary." So again, it's recognizing how special it is to worship the Lord. And so he's separating these guys, and he's consecrating them, separating them, preparing them for ministry, both as a reminder to them, but also a reminder to all the people how important it is to serve the Lord, how important it is to worship the Lord, to sacrifice to the Lord. As Paul said in Romans chapter 12, make your bodies living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to the Lord. So our lives, our very lives, should be living sacrifices to the Lord in the same way that these guys are sacrificing to the Lord. Our sacrifices daily in how we live and act and walk around and speak should be offerings to God. And so it should be held, that worship should be held to the same regard, to the same level of honor that these guys are being presented here in Numbers. Verse 20. "Thus did Moses and Aaron and all the congregation of the people of Israel to the Levites, according to all that the Lord commanded Moses concerning the Levites, the people of Israel did to them. And the Levites purified themselves from sin and washed their clothes, and Aaron offered them as a wave offering before the Lord. And Aaron made atonement for them to cleanse them. And after that, the Levites went in to do their service in the tent of meeting before Aaron and his sons, as the Lord had commanded Moses concerning the Levites, so they did to them. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, This applies to the Levites from 20 years old and upward. They shall come to do duty in the service of the tent of meeting. And from the age of 50 years old, they shall withdraw from the duty of the service and serve no more. They minister to their brothers in the tent of meeting by keeping guard, but they shall do no service. Thus shall you do to the Levites in assigning their duties." So even when they step aside from the primary work in the temple, they still have a job to do. They're not just supposed to go lay about and do nothing. They still have service to do, responsibility of things to do for the Lord in serving each other. and taking care of each other as they all minister. Chapter 9. And the Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the first month of the second year after they had come out of the land of Egypt, saying, "Let the people of Israel keep the Passover at its appointed time. On the 14th day of this month at twilight, you shall keep it at its appointed time, according to all its statutes and its rules, you shall keep it." So Moses told the people of Israel that they should keep the Passover. And they kept the Passover in the first month on the 14th day of the month at twilight in the wilderness of Sinai, according to all that the Lord commanded Moses. So the people of Israel did. And there were certain men who were unclean through touching a dead body, so that they could not keep the Passover on that day. They came before Moses and Aaron on that day, and those men said to him, "We are unclean through touching a dead body. Why are we kept from bringing the Lord's offering at its appointed time among the people of Israel?" And Moses said to them, "Wait, that I may hear what the Lord will command concerning you." So now this is very important. It was a law, right? It was a command that if you touch a dead body, you're unclean. If it's a dead body from, it's not your immediate family, not your spouse, that you're unclean and can't take part in the worship for a period of time. Well, it's Passover time. These guys did touch a dead body, so they violated the law, so technically they're unclean. So what do? They go and they appeal to the Lord through Moses. They don't just say, we accept that we can't worship. They say, we want to worship. We want to participate in the worship. And so they go and they appeal to the Lord. And why this is important is because, later on, especially under the Pharisees during Jesus' day and time, the law was the law and there was no violation of it. There was no appeal process. You violated it, you're done. It's over. But the law, even in of itself, is, though set, is still principles. The whole purpose of these was the importance of worship and the value of worship. And these guys were demonstrating that heart in wanting to take part in the worship. And so they appealed the law and said, "We want to worship. What can we do to be a part of the worship?" So Moses goes to the Lord and asks, "Can these guys be a part of the worship?" Verse 9. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the people of Israel, saying, if one of you or your descendants is unclean through touching a dead body and is on a long journey, he shall still keep the Passover to the Lord. In the second month, on the 14th day, at twilight, they shall keep it. They shall eat it with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. They shall leave none of it until the morning, nor break any of its bones. According to the statute of the Passover, they shall keep it. But if anyone who is clean and is not on a journey fails to keep the Passover, that person shall be cut off from his people, because he did not bring the Lord's offering at its appointed time. That man shall bear his sin. And if a stranger sojourns among you and would keep the Passover to the Lord according to the statute of the Passover, according to its rule, so shall he do. He shall have one statute, both for the sojourner and for the native." So he's saying just delay it a month. You can still participate in the worship, just do it a month later. He's not saying you're kept from worship altogether. You miss it, you got to wait a year. He's saying, no, you can still do it, just do it next month. There's concession being made for these guys because their heart is in the right place. And that's the whole point of this, having a heart for worship. Verse 15. On the day that the tabernacle was set up, the cloud covered the tabernacle, the tent of the testimony. And at evening it was over the tabernacle like the appearance of fire until morning. So it was. The cloud covered it by day, and the appearance of fire by night. And whenever the cloud lifted from over the tent, after that the people of Israel set out. And in the place where the cloud settled down, there the people of Israel camped. At the command of the Lord, the people of Israel set out. And at the command of the Lord they camped. As long as the cloud rested over the tabernacle, they remained in camp. Even when the cloud continued over the tabernacle many days, the people of Israel kept the charge of the Lord and did not set out. They're not going to go anywhere unless God is going somewhere. They refuse to do anything without the Lord, which honestly is how we ought to operate today. We ought to not go anywhere unless the Lord goes. We ought not to stay anywhere unless the Lord stays with us and tells us to stay there. We ought to be moving wherever the Lord would have us move, staying wherever the Lord would have us stay. Verse 20. Sometimes the cloud was a few days over the tabernacle, and according to the command of the Lord, they remained in camp. Then according to the command of the Lord, they set out. And sometimes the cloud remained from evening until morning. And when the cloud lifted in the morning, they set out. And if it continued for a day and a night, when the cloud lifted, they set out. Whether it was 2 days or a month or a longer time that the cloud continued over the tabernacle, abiding there, the people of Israel remained in camp and did not set out. But when it lifted, they set out. At the command of the Lord, they camped, and at the command of the Lord, they set out. They kept the charge of the Lord at the command of the Lord by Moses. So they followed the Lord's direction in their going out and staying in constantly. Let's go to Mark chapter 13, verse 14. This is Jesus speaking both about some destruction that's going to come soon, the destruction of the temple, and the end times. And he's talking about them, both of those occasions, one close at hand, one far away, at least in our reckoning, in the same chapter. Verse 14. But when you see the abomination of desolation, standing where he ought not to be, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let the one who is in the housetop, or on the housetop, not go down, nor enter his house to take anything out. And let the one who is in the field not turn back to take his cloak. And alas, for women who are pregnant, and for those who are nursing infants in those days. Pray that it may not happen in winter. For in those days there will be such tribulation as has not been from the beginning of the creation that God created until now, and never will be. And if the Lord had not cut short the days, no human being would be saved. But for the sake of the elect whom he chose, he shortened the days. And then, if anyone says to you, look, here is the Christ, or look, there he is, do not believe it. For false Christs and false prophets will arise and perform signs and wonders to lead astray, if possible, the elect. That's Christians, that's believers, that's followers. But be on guard. I have told you all things beforehand. But if in those days after that tribulation the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light and the stars will be falling from heaven and the powers in the heavens will be shaken, and then they will see the Son of Man coming in clouds with great power and glory. And then he will send out the angels and gather his elect from the four winds, from the ends of the earth to the ends of heaven. From the fig tree, learn its lesson. As soon as its branch becomes tender and puts out its leaves, you know that summer is near. So also, when you see these things taking place, you know that he is near, at the very gates. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. Now, there's been great confusion about that verse 30 there. This generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Because they're saying, is he talking about the end times, thousands of years later? Or is he talking about right now? The temple's about to be destroyed in a couple decades. It's the temple in a couple decades. It's the difficulty that's going on in that moment, the persecution that's about to break out in the book of Acts, the persecution that drops on the people. He says that's going to happen with this generation of believers right here. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. The earth and heaven will at one point, book of Revelation, be destroyed, but the words of Jesus will last forever and never be destroyed. Verse 32. But concerning that day or that hour, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. Now that's difficult for some people to accept. The Son, Jesus, does not know the day or the hour of the end. Philippians tells us that Jesus, in coming to earth, he had to limit himself in some capacities. Because if he arrived in full glory on this earth, the earth would not be able to remain because his full glory is so overwhelming and powerful. And so he had to limit himself in some capacity in order to just be around us. I mean, even just think of Moses on the mountain, just being able to experience God in a very limited capacity. When he came off the mountain, it said he glowed just from being in God's presence. So imagine those guys being in Jesus' presence day in and day out. If he was just in some semblance of his glory, they would just, like glow-in-the-dark people walking around. So he had to limit himself, as he does, it seemingly, with this knowledge as well while he's here on earth. He says, be on guard, keep awake. This is something he says repeatedly in this section. This is the point of this whole section. Be on guard, stay awake. Pay attention to what's happening around you and act accordingly. For you do not know when the time will come. It is like a man going on a journey when he leaves home and puts his servants in charge, each with his work, and commands the doorkeeper to stay awake. Therefore, stay awake, for you do not know when the master of the house will come, in the evening, or at midnight, or when the rooster crows, or in the morning, lest he come suddenly and find you asleep. And what I say to you, I say to all, stay awake. Let's go to Psalm 50. A psalm of Asaph, verse 1. The mighty one, God the Lord, speaks and summons the earth from the rising of the sun to its setting. Out of Zion, the perfection of beauty, God shines forth. Zion was the hill that Jerusalem was on. It was the place where the temple was, the place where the Ark of the Covenant was. That was supposed to be the Ark of the Covenant. It represented God's presence. And so oftentimes, speaking of the Ark, they're speaking of God's presence, speaking of the temple, speaking of God's presence, the center of the nation being where God's presence is, Jerusalem being where God's presence is, the Mount Zion, that's where God's presence is. That's what it's talking about when it's talking about Zion, about Jerusalem, the city. It's symbolic of where the Lord is. Out of Zion, the perfection of beauty, God shines forth. Our God comes. He does not keep silence. Before Him is a devouring fire, around Him a mighty tempest. He calls to the heavens above and to the earth that He may judge His people. Gather to me, my faithful ones, who made a covenant with me by sacrifice. The heavens declare His righteousness, for God Himself is judge. God's glory and righteousness and power are displayed in His creation. Hear, O my people, and I will speak. O Israel, I will testify against you. I am God, your God. Not your sacrifices do I rebuke you. Not for your sacrifices do I rebuke you. Your burnt offerings are continually before me. You guys constantly come to the temple. You constantly bring offerings and sacrifices. You follow the law. He said, I will not accept a bull from your house or goats from your fields. For every beast of the forest is mine, the cattle on 1,000 hills. He says, you bring me that stuff. He says, it's already mine. You think those cattle are yours? You think those sacrifices are yours? They're mine to begin with. It's the same today when we bring tithes and offering to the church, monetary gift, financial gifts. It's already God's. You know, we're not blessing God with it because it's already His. He doesn't need it. But He tells us to bring it because it's a reflection of a heart of worship, of faith, of trust in Him. He says, I know all the birds of the hills and all that moves in the field is mine. If I were hungry, I would not tell you, for the world and its fullness are mine. Do I eat the flesh of bulls or drink the blood of goats? Offer to God a sacrifice of thanksgiving and perform your vows to the Most High. It's about where your heart is in bringing worship, offering, sacrifice to the Lord. And call upon me in the day of trouble, and I will deliver you, and you shall glorify me. But to the wicked, God says, the wicked are those, when it speaks of the wicked, the unrepentant, those who work in opposition to the work of God. But to the wicked, God says, what right have you to recite my statutes or take my covenant on your lips? For you hate discipline, and you cast my words behind you. If you see a thief, you are pleased with him, and you keep company with adulterers. So you're happy with sin, and you willingly accept sin and don't feel uncomfortable with it, don't feel convicted by it, almost endorse its activity. You give your mouth free rein for evil, and your tongue frames deceit. You sit and speak against your brother. You slander your own mother's son. These things you have done, and I have been silent. You thought that I was one like yourself. But now I rebuke you and lay the charge before you. God said, I don't think like you think. I think differently than you think because I'm God. Mark this then, you who forget God, lest I tear you apart and there be none to deliver. The one who offers thanksgiving as his sacrifice glorifies me. To one who orders his way rightly, I will show the salvation of God. Who follows the Lord faithfully with his whole heart. Proverbs chapter 10, verse 29. The way of the Lord is a stronghold to the blameless, but destruction to evildoers. Following the way of the Lord is a place of refuge and safety. Even if there are dangers, being there with the Lord provides all the safety and comfort and power you need. The righteous will never be removed, but the wicked will not dwell in the land. Working in opposition to the way of God, you will find great difficulty and problems in your heart, in your mind, in your life. Follow God faithfully. So thank you for joining us as we read through God's Word. I hope you will join us tomorrow as we keep journeying through God's Word and seeing its power as it resonates within each of us.